Good morning, everybody. I had a change of plans today. I did a lot of praying, just hours of it, because that's a Friday intercession, which includes those in leadership. Besides all the other, it's an organized Friday intercession. And I didn't realize I was going to upload again all those videos to get them on all the sites. And then I thought, I didn't plan it, but I thought I have to share an incident, because I believe that those that are with CCPD and others, they might think, maybe a few weeks ago, when family members have drug problems. I grew up in a home like that, where my sister sadly was an addict for many, many years, who has since passed away. So I'm familiar with some of the things that go on. And of course I have a daughter that struggles with the same thing. But a few weeks ago, she was having that problem. And out of anger, oftentimes I don't come to the house, or if I come back to the house and I realize that something's like that, I try to go, I try to leave. But as I went in the house, realizing, it's one of those days, out of anger, my daughter punched me without me looking, just kind of walking through. I wasn't afraid of the punch, though it was a fairly hard punch. But I thought, I don't want to be inside a house where if I get mad, and I didn't. I was mad, but I wanted to be out of the house quickly. But at that time when that happened, I was on the phone with my wife, because I realized, my daughter was having problems, certain things were going on. So I was talking to her, saying, and that's when it happened. And then my wife had heard it, and she asked if she should call the cops. And I said, who knows, she might wind up stabbing me. That's kind of what was in my mind. I said, I don't know how bad she would get. But I went out of the house, and then my wife had called the police. And I just waited outside. Now, none of this was a setup, a plan. And I figured it'd be better for me. I think I even saw a neighbor or somebody, they thought, why is he standing out there? And I said, I'm having some problems, and it's better for me not to be in the house when something like that happens. And I didn't do anything in response. Of course, I immediately made sure I got out of the house. So my daughter, I guess, went outside. And this is not to necessarily fault the cops, but I was surprised at the response. Multiple officers showed up, and I guess it was reported as a stabbing. And I could understand possible miscommunication. I can understand that, you get a call. Believe me, this was not planned. But they had multiple weapons drawn on my daughter, and I was outside. And I said, no, you don't have to pull the weapon. I'm assuming safety's off and fingers on the trigger. I was shocked at the response. There was multiple of them. Now maybe that's the way they have to respond. But I wouldn't think you'd respond that way to a call that there's no gun. I have taken knives away from, many years ago, I had a friend of mine, Richard, and he married a girl that used to, they're no longer married, Christian friends, but she went to the roll-off homes. Her name was Karen. And she was a troubled girl that somehow got into one of the Christian homes here many years ago to kind of help the girls in trouble. But he married her. And my friend Richard liked to go to Brother Roloff's. Back in those days, we'd go together from Kingsville and visit Brother Roloff's church, People's Baptist Church. But I remember one time we were at Richard's house, and he was fighting with Karen, and this was in Kingsville. And then she had a knife. And at that point, not even going behind her, I had to get up. I said, Karen, and I just, is she going to stab me? I made sure I grabbed the knife, then got around her back and said, honey, you drop the knife, and I got the knife, and later Richard said, you saved my life. Okay, I'm just simply saying there are levels of response. This was not a planned thing. But my daughter later, I was surprised, and I said a few times, no, you don't need to have multiple weapons pointed at my daughter. This was a problem, and then my daughter watched it on the video later and was very mad at me. I didn't know you would have a response like that. Du Bois Lister's son, I still see his message when I look at my YouTube thing, because he left me a message. But his, Du Bois Lister was, I have his picture here, he was the black man that was killed by CCPD. And the officer is a relative of one of the local judges here. I think Nanette Hassett. He's related to the people in power in this community. But the Du Bois Lister case was a black man who CCPD pulled over. I've commented on the case. And then he left. Lister left the scene, if you will, fled the scene. And so he was being followed. Mr. Lister went to his neighborhood, and he was going to run to his house. Maybe he was drinking. He got pulled over and had other DUIs. But the officer pursued by himself, as far as I know from looking at everything, and kept running after Mr. Lister, who was a big man. And at one point the scuffle ensued, and he told him, I'm going to shoot you, because he was one-on-one with Mr. Lister. And something that could have been resolved by saying, I'm calling for backup. He's at his house. We checked it. He's not on the run for bank robbery or anything else. Probably, maybe he was drinking. And it's going to be a simple DUI. Bad, but simple. Something of that nature. But because the altercation occurred, Officer Hassett pulled his service weapon and killed Mr. Lister. Now, Mr. Lister's son has said they're not showing all that happened, or I don't know. And the reason I bring this other one up is I didn't think you would have guns like that. And she did not have a knife in her hand, but they said get on the ground with guns. It would have been very easy to simply have murdered her. And then to have said they didn't listen to. Okay, now, I don't fault, I guess that's the response they have here. And if you're going to a scene with a weapon, a gun or whatever, but I've had some of my friends that in non-law enforcement activities who had the absolute shit beat out of them by cops. I mean brutalized. On video on the Stripes camera. Brutalized. I'll beat your fucking ass so bad, officer, to my civilian friend. Ended it. Multiple histories of that out here. And then that was reported to Internal Affairs, and the cops here, the supervisor said, we promise we'll never lay a hand on you again, meaning acknowledging that was an assault and battery. It wasn't an arrest, it was a targeted assault. And after that report, that same cop, the next day, showed up in the cop car at the house that my friend was staying at. Look, they all know each other because they have histories of the past. And said, hey, we caught the guy that beat your ass. The same cop who beat the shit out of my friend. We caught the guy that beat the fuck out of you. And we sent him to Port Aransas. And I thought, you criminal motherfuckers. You criminal motherfuckers would have the unprofessionalism to know that one of your motherfuckers was doing that. breaking every fucking law in the book. And he had the balls to show up at that residence in Turtle Cove, sit in that parking lot, and wait for my friend. I won't give the name again. You all know who he is, because he had a history. And then that's the discipline? That's the fucking discipline? Now, can you imagine knowing that then you're going out in your vehicle and it's an element of fucking criminals that would have the balls to either hit Jesse with the cop car, knock him down to one knee. Hey, motherfucker. Cops saying that to these guys. And you talk about, I don't see them. So will we have an interview with you, Mr. Markle, today? Which as a citizen, I have every right to interview you in person. Or Mr. Gonzalez, maybe I should have an interview with you at the courthouse today. Or Mr. Vinales, though I know you're not a sitting judge here, you're a visiting judge. You're coming from out of the valley. Can we sit down and have interviews today? Or would the response be, get one of the connected guys to either beat the fuck out of John, or beat the fuck out of his friends, or possibly blow his ass away? Is that how you operate in South Texas? And I gave that case. You think I'm kidding about that? There's so many cases. That's the name, Shannon Case. I remember when my friend Shannon Case told me that one. Why did they beat the fuck out of your friend, Joe? Because they stopped him earlier that day, years ago. CCPD. And thought he had drugs on him. And he didn't. And it pissed that cop off. And that cop went home, whether he was off the clock or not, but he had a history of putting on civilian clothing and saying, he said that multiple times to the guys, I'll get out of my uniform, I'll come back and beat the fuck out of you. And did it. So that's who jumped him, right here at the stripes. And they didn't know, it beat the shit out of him. He went to the hospital. They didn't know initially it was a CCBD cop. The cop who stopped him couldn't find nothing on him. The cop got mad, later on jumped him at the stripes. Then they realized, oh, that was one of us. And when they realized that, when the cops showed up, according to the story, which I've heard multiple, it's 1 in a million. The other CCPD showed up at the stripes here at Flower Bluff. This might have been 15 years ago. Said, and then they knew, oh, it was one of us. We'll go find him. Like, go real slow. Like, are you fucking kidding me? In any civilized city in this country, you motherfuckers would be in jail. We're not just talking about crossing lines. We're talking about felonies in those particular instances. Now, I don't fault you completely for the response that I mentioned earlier on this video. And I recognize that when you get a call, whether it's a stabbing, a shooting, I understand that's considered a high thing. I just was very surprised. I was surprised, and I said, no, you don't have your guns pointed, multiple guns pointed at her. On the ground, I was right there. There was no knife in her hand. And it was a miscommunication because my wife was on the phone at that time. But I thought the level of violence, the inability to understand what the fuck de-escalation means, the backwater fucking supervision in this area. There was an article yesterday. I was going to speak on it about a week before it came out. And somebody wrote an article and said, and if you want to deal, in the Cold Times, if you want to deal with the deficit problem in the city, you got to deal with the contracts for police officers and firefighters. Because that's a big problem. I mean, too many benefits for the city, size of the city. They're giving too many benefits. And I was going to say that. I was going to say, because we used to do collective bargaining at the Kings Hill Fire Department. I was in the union. At times I'd be there in the bargaining negotiations. But there was a time where we were getting really good deals, more than we should have got, but we were getting them. And at one point we sat down, our own union and bargaining guys, and we said, you know what? We better not. We're getting too much. It would be better for us to delay some of the promised raises. Because when you get raises in negotiations with police and fire, by law, you got to follow that. And that's one of the problems with the money situation right now. And somebody wrote an article about that. Now, most of the times, if you're a cop or firefighter, most of the times you're not going to sit down. And that's not the chief's fault, whether the fire chief or police chief. Once they become chief, they are no longer in the ranks. They are management, okay? So a police chief or a fire chief, they're not the ones that would change the contracts. But to sit down with the guys, you can reopen up negotiations. Even if you have a 3-year contract, 3% raise and all that, it would be the union leader, the president of the firefighters union and the president of the police union. They would have to be the ones on their own that would say, we're going to talk to our rank and file guys. And so I just found it interesting because I was thinking of that. Now, all that you just heard me talk about now, none of it is new except for the recent thing. And of course, I'm not, the response of the thing that they came here, I'm sure that's their normal response. I'm not saying they responded differently because it was this home. No, I'm assuming that's how they respond. And I would just simply say there'd have to be better training, because it would be so easy to accidentally have just shot. Now, the boy lists his son on the little note he left on YouTube. Maybe I'll have to speak with his son, because he contends that, the family contends that there was connections here that Officer Hassett related to Nanette Hassett, that there was favoritism. Now, Mr. Gonzalez, DA, supposedly looked into everything, but now at this stage I realize, he might be a little overwhelmed in the job and unable to deal with it. And you got an array of cases, a caseload coming up for the DA's offices. But I'll tell you, that thing that I told you about, that one singular thing about fucking Shannon case, is true as a fucking heart attack. And those motherfuckers rose the ranks and are still on the fucking job. And you laugh your asses off. And then the lunacy of this local commission, looking at, there's this perspective of, oh my, that could never be a problem, that you're so fucking blind. Many stories, the resale of illegal confiscated drugs, meaning my friends in their past life, and they called it cop dope, and it was sprayed with a particular thing. There were times over the years where guys said they saw cops taking shit out of their own car and putting it in their vehicle in the city. It was very open in this community. And you say, how do you know some of those? Because I heard so many fucking stories. And I testify to you by the word of the Lord, one of those motherfuckers tried to run me off the highway. There should have been a firing right on that. Right on the fucking Oso Bridge. 100 miles an hour. I was just pulling up on there, trying to run me off the fucking road. And how much benefits are you getting with zero fucking discipline in your department? And a corruption that I know is true, because there were multiple raids that outside entities did, and they didn't even let the CCPD in on it. And if those of you that are so-called supervisors in leadership, you could read that when the Caller Times puts that in there. They don't openly say, see that? The other agency could not trust the CCPD. They simply say, CCPD was not in on it until the day of the bust. They're giving you enough fucking information so as supervisors, you'd realize, oh, there's a problem. But you're too busy walking the pirate plank, falling flat on your face as a mayor in the water, and playing kiddie games while the community goes bust, and you have zero fucking discipline in that department. Zero. When you hear me talk about some of the other stuff, that's not even in the bluff. insurance jobs, burning your own fucking vehicle because you can't make the payment, you're in a crisis, right in fucking public. And other people not even involved in the circle I'm in saying, wow, these guys are rogue. And you laugh? I feel bad for these young rookies. My wife and daughter, about 8 months ago, a year ago, and it wasn't to get anybody in trouble. There was a vehicle coming right around, it was at night, and it was right on Flower Bluff Drive under the turnaround. And there was a vehicle without the lights on, without headlights on. Now they didn't know it was a cop car. And as they passed, the cop car passed them up, still had the lights off. And it was a lady cop talking on the phone with the lights off. Now, okay, so they called like the business line and said, we just want to let you know. And not a big thing, not so much criminal. They were allowed to be on the phone, I understand that. But it showed me the younger people coming in. It's such a damn shame that the other guys, and Mr. Markle's been here. He knows about the incidents, I'm positive. He might have been that officer supervisor where they covered up for multiple years of felonies. I talked about the raids they did years ago. They raided a trailer park in the Bluff. And later an officer went, civilian clothes, after the raid and collected all the weapons. And the guys that reported that to me, I said, was it like part of the raid? No. I'm going to get the guns. I want them. And it was so open, so open. I reported that. And what is this commissioner's name? Marquez or whatever. They all had letters about all this shit. Some of them. And they said, you're so duped. You're so duped. So, will it be Mr. Gonzalez? We'll have you, Mr. Gonzalez, on a video today. Because I too am media. I too am media. And we too have a voice. No secret interviews. Or will it be Mr. Markle today that I will answer these questions, sir? Because the media and the local community, the leadership of this city is absolutely unable, intimidated, and blind